Good morning and welcome to our survey of the book of Numbers. We're going to get through it. Numbers covers about 38 years of desert wandering by the Israelites. It's called Numbers because it includes two numberings of the men of war. The first numbering is in chapters 1 through 4. That was made the second year after the Israelites left Egypt. Then beginning with Judah, which led the way, each tribe was given a position in the march to Canaan. From that point on, Numbers is a wilderness book. It describes the failure of Israel at Kadesh Barnea and their wilderness wanderings until the unbelieving generation died, after which the second numbering took place, and that's chapters 26 and 27. One author described the book of Numbers as the longest funeral march in history. Israel did not grow during this 38-year period. They actually declined by almost 2,000 men of war. They basically wasted 38 years and suffered unnecessary affliction. This is what unbelief will do to you as a Christian believer. It produces wasted time, wasted effort. Don't fall into the trap of spiritual stagnation. There are a lot of spiritual lessons to be gleaned from the book of Numbers, and you can find those in the book of Hebrews, chapters 3 and 4, and the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 10. Let's take a brief look at an outline of the book. You can see four broad categories that we will discuss. Let's begin with preparations for the wilderness. These events began about a month after the tabernacle was built, or about 2 years after the Exodus. Levites were excluded from the census and from the regulations which were laid down for all the other tribes. Now, there's no reason given as to why the tribe of Levi was singled out. It might be because Moses and Aaron were the tribe of Levi, or it might be that this tribe was so quick to take a stand for God in that whole golden calf incident in Exodus chapter 32. When you get to chapters 2, 3, and 4, they deal with the location of the tribes in their wilderness camp. Central to the camp was the tabernacle, and that was surrounded by the tents of the Levites, each by their clans. The Girgashites, the Kohathites, the Merarites, wow, all those ites. It's a process, isn't it, for us to put that in our language. You get to chapter 5, it deals with purity in the camp. This principle of purity, here in the book of Numbers, it's a ceremonial thing, but we see these moral principles with a New Testament correlation in several places. In a nutshell, God does not dwell in the midst of impurity. Numbers chapter 6 contains the regulations for the Nazirite vow. A Nazirite was one who was consecrated to God. This vow could be for a designated period of time, or it can be a lifetime vow. But either way, the vow was always voluntary. The purpose of the Nazirite vow was that through their lifestyle, a Nazirite could demonstrate God's highest standards of holiness and commitment to the people of God. There's a good application there for you and I as Christians. We should do our best to have that kind of devotion in our Christian walk. Chapter 6, 24 through 26 have that beautiful passage called the Aaronic or the priestly blessing. I preached on that Sunday. You can watch that video for details. Chapter 7 through 9, they contain information about offerings brought to the dedication of the tabernacle, the consecration of the Levites, and the Passover. Chapters 10 through 21 detail for us the wanderings through the wilderness. After being at Sinai for over a year, Israel broke camp and they headed for Kadesh Barnea. Imagine, if you would, 1 million plus people marching behind the Ark of the Covenant. What a sight that must have been. Chapter 11, the people complain for their lack of food, and what does God do? He provides. Chapter 12, Miriam and Aaron think Moses is too big for his britches, and God teaches everybody a lesson in humility. Chapters 13 through 14 are the story of the 12 men went to spy in Canaan. 10 were bad, 2 were good. What do you think they saw in Canaan? 10 were bad, 2 were good. Some saw giants big and strong. Some saw grapevines clusters long. Some saw God was in it all. 10 were bad and 2 were good. How's that for a Bible survey? Chapters 16 through 18 deal with a rebellion against the anointed priesthood. And those who rebelled were utterly destroyed. Aaron and the true priests were vindicated as recognized by the budding staff in chapter 17. Chapters 22 through 25 record this incident with Balaam. This man's life was confusing, to say the very least. He was a pagan, but God used him as a prophet. He obeyed God, and he didn't curse Israel at Balak's request, yet in Numbers 31, his counsel led to abominations and idolatry. Ultimately, Balaam died in the judgment of God poured out on the Midianites. I think a lesson can be learned here for those who try to walk on both sides of the spiritual street. God does not tolerate compromised religion. Chapters 26 through 36 are the preparations to enter Canaan. After the old generation died, everybody except Joshua and Caleb, a new census was taken. And in chapter 32, Reuben and Gad asked for permission to settle on the east side of the Jordan. It wasn't God's perfect will, but it was permitted. I want you to notice the result of this decision of kind of taking matters into their own hands. We read in 1 Chronicles chapter 5, they were unfaithful to God, and they prostituted themselves to the gods of the people of the lands whom God had destroyed before them. So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, who took the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh into exile. Kind of a sad historical record of taking matters into your own hands. The remainder of the book deals with the assigning of the inheritance, the cities of the Levites, and various laws. Numbers 32:23 says, "If you fail to do this, you'll be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will find you out." It's a very familiar passage. It's oftentimes quoted in church. Rarely do people recognize that it comes from the book of Numbers. Specifically in this passage, this is arming for battle to drive out the enemies of the Lord. If you fail to do this, drive out the enemies, be sure your sins will find you out. I don't want to go too deep in this, but I think a good application of this verse is sins do catch up with us, not just in the life to come, but in this life also. If there's sin in your heart, now's a good time to confess it and get right with God.